Before we get started with this episode, I wanted to give you some exciting news that the first Wednesday of every month, there will be an introductory session presented by me for the Creighton model system, which is a system of fertility charting. This introductory session, you will leave knowing the basics of knowing how to chart your cycle, and you will learn so much about your reproductive anatomy, hormones, physiology, all the things. So many times I give this presentation to women and to couples, and they always say, why have I never known this information before? So if you are interested in signing up for this introductory session, it is just $50 to get started with this session. From there, we'll do some one-on-one coaching, get you really locked and loaded with knowing how to chart your cycle and becoming so much more empowered from there. Visit truthandfertility.com to sign up. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. I'm Haley, wife, mom, and a fertility charting instructor, here to teach you the undeniable truth about your fertility. So let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. Today, I am talking with Sophie Shepherd. She is the founder of She Talks Health and a functional health practitioner. She helps women with things like Hashimoto's disease, thyroid issues, and just any mystery symptoms like bloating, fatigue, anxiety, brain fog. I know about brain fog. If you're a mother, you know about brain fog. And she helps you find easy ways to feel like yourself again. So her approach blends functional lab testing, mineral balancing, emotional wellness tools to create really personalized health shifts without the crazy extremes. So Sophie's mission is to help women take their power back and slay the old stories that have kept them stuck in sick, burnt out bodies. Sophie, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for welcoming me. I love hearing the last line of that. Just makes me like the call to action. Like, come on, ladies, let's go. Let's clean up the health. And
yes, exactly. And that is the mission here, right? Like we were talking earlier before we started recording that the mission is just to teach women about their bodies. And for some reason, this information is hard to come by. And so when we start teaching this information, it just kind of flows from there and learning like, okay, here we need to eat better. We need to, it flows from there. So it's an awesome conversation, an awesome topic. So I'm excited to chat with you today and really pick your brain. Today, you guys, we're going to be talking about gut health. I feel like when you get into the natural medicine, functional medicine realm, you hear the word gut all the time. And there's a lot of resources out there too that I've looked at to try to understand what this is. But I still have this brain of like, when I hear gut, I just think like punch to your gut. Like, I don't think of like what the gut actually is. I just think, I don't know what I think of. But anyways, I wanted to just get a clear understanding of what the gut actually is. How do we optimize it for our health, specifically for our fertility health, to optimize our reproductive hormones, to make sure that we're ovulating regularly, because especially for women, you know, our hormones really play a part in our daily life and everything that we do, and making sure that they are optimized and healthy so that we feel good. So Sophie, if you can just start, like, what is the gut? What is gut health? Why is it so important? Just kind of just go from there.
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the way I describe the gut is not just your stomach, it's your entire digestive system. If you think about your gut or your digestive system as the tube that starts with your mouth and goes all the way down through your esophagus, through your stomach, all the way through your intestines, which are really, really long, and finally out through the colon. It's kind of like a hose, right? It's like one long tube. And the gut or the digestive system is not just about digesting food. It's an entire ecosystem that's actually happening every single second of every single day for us. And it affects almost every aspect of our health, including hormones. So our gut breaks down our food. It's where we absorb our nutrients. So the gut turns what you eat into the building blocks your body needs to function. Now, if we really think about that for a second, that's pretty phenomenal that we have this system that turns like your steak or your eggs or whatever it is into usable nutrients, right? Like, it's pretty incredible, especially when I talk to most of my clients and they're not even chewing their food. And so it turns proteins you eat into amino acids, which is really incredible for building muscle, which is really important for hormonal health, especially as we get past 35 and we go into perimenopause. It's also really important to have protein for our brain chemistry. So that's what literally makes up serotonin and dopamine. So if you've ever dealt with like anxiety or depression or moodiness, it could be because the protein's not getting digested properly. Healthy fats, as maybe the audience knows, is like the building block for all of our hormones. So if we're not eating healthy fats like avocados, for example, we're not going to have a lot to build from for making hormones. And then finally, vitamins and minerals, which is my personal obsession. I'm a mineral expert. I've been training in this test called the HTMA for a long time, ladies, a long time. And those give us like our energy and our repair, and they fuel our adrenals and they fuel our thyroid. And these are the things that help balance all of our sex hormones as well. And so if our gut is not working well, then even the healthiest diet is not going to give us what we need because we simply won't absorb it. Additionally, this is a huge thing for anyone who does have an autoimmune disease like I do. And like I coach my clients with Hashimoto's, which by the way, like it's like 1 in 7 women at this point. It's pretty much an epidemic. The immune system is in your gut. So 70% of our immune system is actually held in our gut. So when I think about gut, I think about immune system. So if you're constantly sick all the time, that's a gut stuff that's going on. Something's up in your gut. The gut lining, it's like a security system. It's constantly deciding what's getting in and what's getting to stay out. And a strong gut protects you from infections and toxins and inflammation. And a weak gut lining, it's sometimes called a leaky gut or a semi-permeable gut, can trigger immune problems and even autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, or even potentially linked to things like endometriosis or worsening, just inflammation and inflammatory conditions. That's really huge. And people don't realize that. I mean, like symptoms for gut, like an imbalanced gut, can really, they're not just like bloating and gas and diarrhea, constipation. It goes way further than that to skin issues and mood swings and just like kind of everything you could think of. And so we are actually more microbe than we are human cell. So there's literally trillions of microbes in our microbiome, which is like, I think of it as like this bustling city of bacteria and yeast and even viruses and parasites and things like that. And when they're in balance, they help us digest food and produce vitamins and keep our immune system calm. And when they're out of balance, we call this dysbiosis. You can experience some of those symptoms like bloat, constipation, diarrhea, skin issues, mood swings. And then the last thing that I think about when I think about the gut is detoxification, which is so important for hormones. So there's actually something called the estrobolome, which is linked to estrogen. And so our gut is one of the main one of our main detox organs, like especially our colon, which is where we go to the bathroom. And especially and specifically for clearing excess hormones like estrogen. So if you've ever been told like, oh, I have estrogen dominance, or like I have PMS, or I have heavy periods, fibroids, weight gain, that could be linked to estrogen recirculating in the gut and not getting out through the estrobolome and through the colon. And so that's actually something that I test for in a lot of women, because it's probably like 70% of my clients who kind of match that description, maybe like heavier, painful periods, maybe more sensitive breasts and like swelling, or PMS, things like that. So there is a lot when it comes to the gut. It's so essential. It's why you hear like gut health is so important. So I think I'll pause there because I'm sure there's questions from that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is such a good, that's probably one of the best just kind of overviews of gut health that I have heard. So thank you for that. There's definitely a lot of paths that we can take from that. But the first thing that really comes to my mind, and I think this is more of like the practical aspect of it, but I hear you saying that even if you have an extremely healthy diet, your body might not be absorbing the nutrients from that healthy diet to actually give you the benefits of that healthy diet. And it makes me think too of like hormones, right? We have hormones, but then we have hormone receptors. And so we could have, the best hormones going, like balance of hormones, but if those hormone receptors aren't working, then the hormones aren't doing their job, right? So it kind of reminds me of that. So where do we go from, like, what is next then? Like, what would be the next step to make sure that if we're doing the hard work of eating healthy and eating protein, starting our day with protein, doing all those things, but if our body isn't actually absorbing those nutrients, what do we do? Like, where do we go from there? What's the first step?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's almost like two tiers. Like the first tier is the low-hanging fruit of like, and I can go through those in a second. And then the second tier is like, if you're still struggling, and I really mean this with like so much love, but so much honesty, is test and don't guess. I know we haven't really got into my story, but I got diagnosed with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, when I was 16 years old. I had to do a colonoscopy and an endoscopy, which I shouldn't have to do still. I'm 36. I shouldn't even have to do that, right? For many, many more years, but I had to when I was 16 years old. And you know, I did the traditional medical route and there was no answers for me. And I wasted 7 years of my life feeling absolutely horrible to the point of getting an autoimmune disease by the time I'm 22. So once I found someone who knew what he was talking about and he tested my gut, I found out that it was full of bacteria, full of yeast, full of parasites. I wasn't digesting my protein well. I had a leaky gut. There were so many things kind of quote unquote off or like wrong. And within like 2 weeks of being on the protocol, everything started to calm down. And within 90 days, all of my issues reversed. So I know it's expensive sometimes to like invest in our health, but it is the most important thing in our lives, because if without our health, we don't have anything. We can't be there for our kids. We can't be there for our partners. We can't show up at work. So I really do encourage it for the right person. Now, before you do a test, I think there's some basic ground rules to cover because there are people who don't need to test because they just need to address some lifestyle things. So I'd love to share those things with the audience.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so these are my like low hanging fruit kind of things. So number one, it's not just how you eat. It's not just what you eat, but how you eat. So like, healthy food. Okay, your gut is directly tied into the nervous system. Okay, the nervous system being what controls everything, our heartbeat, everything. Our nervous system is the most important part outside of gut health. Stress, rushing through food will definitely cause malabsorption, because if you think about it, our body has this whole chain of reactions that help you to digest food. So when you smell food, it gets your body ready to know that food's coming. When you chew your food, there's a enzyme called amylase that is released in the tongue and in the mouth to help start digestion in the mouth. That's huge. People are like rushing through their food. And I know I just rushed through my breakfast because I was trying to get on this call. And so it's like, obviously, like every meal maybe can't be like perfect, but when you can, really chewing your food actually makes a huge difference so that you're releasing those enzymes that help you digest your food. Eating slowly without distractions actually allows your body to switch into the part of our nervous system that we call the parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, reproduce, and heal. So this is like a fertility podcast, right? So we're talking about reproduction on here. We have to find ways to get out of the stress and go, go, go mode and into rest, digest, and reproduce. We cannot heal in go, go, go mode. That's called sympathetic part of our nervous system. We want to be in parasympathetic. And one really easy and tangible and free, I love free, way to do it is just to take 3 to 5 deep breaths before your meal to calm your nervous system down. And you can literally just breathe in for like 3 seconds and breathe out for 6 seconds. If you breathe out longer than you breathe in, even if it's just by 1 more second, you tell your nervous system, hey, we're safe. It's time to actually like rest and eat this food and be nourished. So that's number one, is kind of like how we eat, setting the stage. And I know that might sound really basic, but if you're not doing it, just try it, because you might notice even 10 to 20% less bloating or 10 to 20% less gas, because your body's actually like, oh, I'm not running from a tiger. I'm not in fight or flight. I'm in like time to eat mode, right? All right. Number 2 would just be like supporting bowel movements. So our goal, if anyone doesn't know, is 1 to 3 complete bowel movements a day. And this is how our body eliminates waste and excess hormones. In order to do this, there are many tips. If you are not doing this, that would put you in the constipation category. A couple of quick things is including enough fiber. So you mentioned protein. Protein's really important, but fiber is often overlooked. So cooked veggies, chia seeds, flax seeds, berries, apples, oats if you tolerate them, beans if you tolerate them, really give you a wide array of soluble and insoluble fiber, which is what the gut microbiota, all those trillions of cells, feed on. That's how the good stuff sticks around, is the variety of fibers that we eat, different types and different colors of plant fibers. And then staying hydrated with filtered water, but not drinking water when we're eating, which is like so opposite of how Americans think. But water, it dilutes stomach acid. So if you're gonna go and eat a big meal and then you're gonna just like wash it down with all this water, you're completely turning off your digestive fire. So we want to stay hydrated so we can go to the bathroom, but we want to do it not like in the middle of our meal. If you have to have a little bit of water to get the food down, that's not like what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like 16 ounces of like a ice cold drink, right? You go to a restaurant, they give you ice water. Ask them to take the ice out. Like that is like, it's going to shut down. Think about what ice does when you have an injury, right? You're like freezing a part of your body. Do we want a frozen stomach when we're trying to digest food? Absolutely not, right? By the way, this is a hormone podcast. Don't drink cold water when you have your period. It'll make the cramps way worse. Just try it. Just trust me and try it. It's like a game changer. So supporting daily bowel movements. I can also send you guys, I did make, it's like such a labor of love. I made a constipation guide because so many of my clients are constipated, so I can send that to the audience. And then number 3 would just be balancing your meals. So I mentioned fiber and you mentioned protein, but yeah, we really want to be thinking about like healthy fats, which is like avocados and olive oils, right? Things like that. And, salmon and like those kind of omega-3 rich fats that are so great for us. That's lubrication and also hormone building. And then protein, which is absolutely essential. And then the carbohydrates are our third macro mineral, but we want to just make sure they're fiber-rich carbohydrates. So instead of like breads and pastas, we want to think like those beans and those, rice and, things like that, apples, those are all carbs, but they have a lot of fiber. So it balances your blood sugar and fuels your gut and helps prevent cravings and mood swings. I think there's probably like 2 more things to kind of mention that are low hanging fruit. So one would be like, again, feeding the good bacteria with all those different plants, but also you can try probiotic rich foods. So that's like sauerkraut, kimchi, unsweetened yogurt. This is like pretty well known. By the way, if that causes problems, come see me. It's time to test. If you're having problems with if you're having problems with regular whole foods like sauerkraut and like carbohydrates, there's an imbalance in the gut. And then like really simply is just reducing things that irritate the gut. So things like processed foods, like your breads, your pastas, your sugary treats, like sugar in general just feeds yeast. So that's a really big thing to keep an eye on. I have a pretty big sweet tooth, so I have to find like alternatives that I don't overdo it. And then alcohol, which I know no one wants to hear, but alcohol definitely feeds harmful bacteria. So some people also really can't tolerate gluten or dairy, but that's really individual. But those are some of like the low hanging fruits. Like if you're just like, all I'm doing is eating pasta every day and I don't eat any vegetables and I don't eat any, fermented foods and I don't take deep breaths before I eat and all those things, like start there because those are like pretty cheap or free. And if you're still struggling after 1 to 2 months, like then I would say like reach out and we can test you. Because I hate hearing like people are like, I hear this all the time, like, oh, I haven't had a good poop in 20 years. I'm like, no, we got to fix that. So those are some of my thoughts. I could ramble forever, so I'm going to stop.
No, this is so good. And I just let you ramble because this is such good information, because I think, we can there's so much to learn. Clearly, there's so much to learn about the gut, about our hormones, about any sort of, whatever, the constipation. There's so much to learn, but a lot of it comes back to just what foods are you putting in your body? And then we can get into, okay, let's not drink a ton of water when you're eating. I've never heard that, but it makes sense because you need that acid in your stomach to break down that food. That makes total sense. Also, the tip with not drinking ice water during your period, that also makes so much sense. So it's these tips that you don't hear a whole lot, but that can really make an impact. I want to go back to your story, if you don't mind, kind of, because I think people's stories can really help us understand and really bring a tangible aspect to, okay, how do we move forward from here? So you said you were diagnosed with IBS at 16. You kind of spent the next few years kind of figuring that out. And then you said, what, at 22, you started seeing was it a different type of doctor? Like, who was it that you started to see?
Yeah, it was a functional medicine doctor. He was a
Okay.
chiropractor who had kind of stumbled into functional medicine. And this was, a long time ago. So this was before everyone and their mother had been to a naturopath and a functional medicine doctor, and it was so
Right.
popular. And so, I mean, I'm laughing at myself because no one knew what I was talking about, and everyone's like, "This is what? You're gonna spend $4,000 on what are you doing?" And my parents, like, they were supportive, but they didn't really get it. And so yeah, but he was the first person. I had a very similar experience to what I do now, which is like when women come in, I actually listen
Yeah. Yeah.
and actually help them pull the pieces together. Because a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I've tried everything. I've already been." This is another thing, by the way. I I have heard so much people are like, "Oh, I've been to a functional medicine doctor," and there's no shade, but listen, like there's a lot of like still not great practices even in this field. And so to be really discerning about like how someone works, what's the check-in process, like how much adjustments can you make, all these different things. But at the time, it was a very like novel experience, and like having a doctor sit there and listen to me for 90 minutes and explain like, hey, your gut is the reason you have this autoimmune disease, and like why you feel so fatigued and all these issues that you're having. So yeah, functional medicine doc.
So the issues you were having before, and then seeing this doctor, him putting you on some sort of protocol or different thing. What did that look like? Was it caused by just the foods that you were eating? Like, what were you doing that was causing that IBS that he put you on a different protocol? And then what did that protocol look like to help relieve that and fix it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is like the great, conversation that comes up so often because women are like, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? And the truth is that a lot of times it has very little to do with the food. And we want to demonize food a lot. I think it's like in our culture to do so. I would say there's like a couple of foods that are really detrimental to gut health. Number one is gluten, and that's regardless if you have celiacs or not. So I was eating gluten at the time. Now, gluten causes leaky gut, can cause leaky gut just in and of itself as a molecule. It's also very sticky, and so it can stick to the lining of the gut and cause absorption issues. And one of the things I know now is that if you do have a gluten sensitivity and it's like kind of sticking to the bottom of your gut, you can't really make amino acids that produce your serotonin and dopamine. So I was actually, at the time, I was in an abusive relationship. And the stress from that really like started, I think, like kind of like the gut health was there, and then the stress like toppled me into the Hashimoto's. And so one of the things that he and I talked a lot about was like getting out of the stress, because that was like contributing a lot. We did talk about going gluten free. I already knew I had dairy issues, so I cut that out. So there wasn't a ton of removals from food, like long term, but short term, I did do an autoimmune protocol, which is very intense, and I don't recommend it for every client. It really has to be factored into like their overall picture and what their mental status is. But I removed nightshades, which are like eggplant, tomatoes, and peppers. I removed all grains, all nuts and seeds. I removed all eggs, caffeine, sugar, dairy, gluten. It was very extreme, very, very
What did
extreme.
you eat? If
Like
all of those things
literally
were
just meat and vegetables and fruit.
okay.
And so it's pretty restrictive. The reason why he did it was because by the time I walked into his office, water was hurting me. Like literally, I would be bent over in pain from drinking water. So my whole system was inflamed. But we only did that for 90 days. So 3 months. Now, again, I don't really recommend this for everyone. Actually, most people I don't really recommend that to. And what he really wanted me to focus on was all the nutrient dense foods that I could eat. So all of the other vegetables besides those three, all of the fruits, all of the meat. And that really restored a lot. But the bigger issue is that the food was irritating me, but it wasn't the cause. It was what happens in our immune system. I mentioned your immune system, 70% is in our gut. So when we take antibiotics, when we take birth control, which I was on birth control at the time, that's a whole other
Oh,
journey
yeah.
that I went through. When we're doing those things, when we are constantly stressed out, when we're constantly eating sugar, I was eating a ton of sugar, I was eating a ton of gluten, I was on birth control. There were a lot of triggers for the gut there. I think stress was the biggest one though. It was eroding my gut. And so then anytime I ate anything, my immune system was on hyper alert, because remember how we talked about the gut goes from the mouth all the way down to the colon, right? And you can think of it like a tube. I think I said that in the beginning, or like a hose. So imagine you're like watering your flowers, and you have a bunch of holes in your watering hose. It's going to work, right? You're going to get the water out the spout, but it's also going to be seeping out everywhere. That's kind of like what leaky gut is. So all the stress, the birth control, the gluten, the sugar, all the things were causing all these like holes. And so then when I would eat like an avocado or whatever, it would seep through the hole and it would cause a food sensitivity. Okay. And so is it the food's fault, or is it the upstream issues? Do you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I did the food elimination because by the time I got to him, I had so many holes that everything hurt. And he was just trying to help get it back down. But I want to be very clear that it wasn't the food's fault that I was in that position. And it honestly wasn't my fault. I didn't know any better. Once I knew
Sure.
better, then I was able to kind of come to it and heal.
Yeah. So by taking away all of those foods, was that for the purpose of allowing your gut to heal and basically have those holes close back up? Like, is that kind of more or less what happened?
Yeah, and I mean, we did a lot more than that because we did the testing. So I
Right.
had parasites, I had yeast, I had bacteria, I wasn't digesting food. And this is all test stuff that I do now for clients, and we run those tests. So I was on a pretty strict supplement schedule as well. So it was immune balancing, because that's what was really creating a lot of the inflammation in my body. And then the removal of the food to stop the immune activation and the Hashimoto's like inflammatory response in my body. Um, and yeah, like breaking up with my ex was hugely helpful. I mean, that
Yeah.
was such a big
Yeah.
stressor. And then getting off birth control too. I did that
Mhm.
later, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Yeah, just eating healthy food, sleeping, moving out of the stress, and yeah, just really caring for my body and I would say like becoming in tune with it and understanding it better. And then when I reintroduced the foods, because obviously I don't eat that way now, it's be too much. I was able to figure out which ones were actually a problem for me. Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
So if you know what actually causes that issue, is it a genetic thing to be so sensitive to it, or is it like, do we know yet what causes the gut issues? Because you're saying, the food is not the food is just exacerbating the problem, right? So then we have to understand, okay, what is the problem? How do we actually fix the problem? But where does that problem even come about? Like I said, is it a
Yeah.
genetic thing? Do we know that yet?
Genetics are, I mean, there's more than genetics, but just to answer that part of the question. So, I wish there was another analogy for this. Yeah, I'm not even actually, I'm like not going to say this on the recording because it's like
That's
too
okay.
violent. But the genetics kind of like create the opportunity for something to happen, and then our environment is what triggers the genetics to play out. So just to be super clear, because this drives me nuts, people are like, well, my mom had heart disease, so I'm going to have heart disease. Absolutely not. You have so much more control over the expression of your genes. So yes, in that, like, you could have genetics that are like more sensitive to gut issues. Like you could be someone who's genetically set up to like not you know process uh gluten or something like that. But overall, what causes gut issues is going to be more so stress. Emotional stress directly causes low stomach acid, enzymatic dysfunction, so we can't digest our food, and leaky gut. So that is the number one thing that people are like, oh, stress, like everyone's stressed. It's no big deal. It is a big deal. If we're constantly in fight or flight, digestion slows down. Your body cannot break down food if it's focused on survival. And that's what you're telling your brain and your body and your nervous system when we're constantly pushing cortisol, stress hormone out. And that can thin the gut lining and lead to all those holes. And then it can lead to food sensitivities. So stress is probably one of the biggest ones. It can also mean like less absorption of nutrients. Okay, so it's number one, stress. Number two, yeah, so some foods like sugar and refined carbs and alcohol and processed foods, the body doesn't know what to do with that. It's not a whole food. So that can be harmful, and it can feed things like bacteria and yeast. So we're not really taught that, right? And so like we might be like in our standard American diet is pretty high in those things. And a lot of people use alcohol to numb, right? And so a lot of times there are certain foods that are like kind of feeding the gut imbalances. Okay. Like, so that is important. And then number three is medications. So I mentioned birth control. So we know birth control pills can alter the gut microbiome, increase inflammation, and potentially even lead to yeast overgrowth. Antibiotics are a huge one. Antibiotics wipe out all the good and the bad bacteria, leaving room for overgrowth of pathogens. So these pathogens that are harmful, we call them opportunistic. They're waiting for an opportunity. They're waiting for you to binge on sugar for 15 years. They're waiting for you to take an aggressive round of antibiotics. Then another one that I was put on, unfortunately, PPIs, antacids, those lower stomach acid, which is what we need to break down food, but also to kill harmful microbes. So when we have low stomach acid, that's when the bacteria and pathogens get in. And then the final medication would be NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, which, by the way, if you need to take an antibiotic or like what, you know what I mean, use discernment. Obviously, like that can save your life.
Sure.
If you need to take NSAID because you are in pain, please do what you need to do. It's just the acknowledgement that it can damage the lining of the gut, right? Like, most people know, like, don't overdo NSAIDs because you can cause an ulcer. Well, like, you don't have to wait to, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a step before ulcer, which is the lining of the gut gets kind of messed up, right? And then the other one is like big infection. So for me, one of my big triggers was I went actually to Mexico and I drank the water. I was like really young, I think 12 or something. And I wasn't listening to my parents. And I got really, really sick with traveler's diarrhea. And so after that, my gut kind of was never the same. And that's a really common story too. And you don't have to go to another country to pick up a parasite. By the way, that's a total myth. They're everywhere. They're in our food, they're in our water in the States as well. But parasites, and then like if there's like bacterial overgrowth or like yeast or candida, any of those things, like if those take hold, they can really damage the gut and cause a lot of like imbalances. And then it's harder to that's where the food like probably isn't enough, right? Like eating all those veggies and stuff like we talked about, it's probably not enough. You kind of have to kill the overgrowth. And then another one is like environmental toxins. So like pesticides, glyphosate, mold, heavy metals. These are things I test my one-to-one clients because I will tell you it's pretty crazy, pretty scary. I actually had a fertility client this past year. She couldn't get pregnant. She came over to me from a podcast I was on, and we ran a total toxin test, which is looking at environmental chemicals, heavy metals, and mold. And she was chock full. I mean, there was like 3 pages worth. And I was like, until this gets resolved, it's going to be really challenging for the body to hold a baby because it's full of toxins. And so it was really messing with her gut and things as well. So I feel like those are some of the main ways that this happens. And I would definitely just say like stress and like trauma is like very linked. Like there's a lot of, even like I think it's like 60% of people who have IBS will have an anxiety disorder. So it's very connected. Like your gut has a superhighway connection to your brain through the vagus nerve. And so when I work with clients in my one-to-one program and in my group, we're really focusing on like the nervous system and the mental piece alongside like killing what other pathogens or balancing the gut, like whatever we need to do. So there's actually like quite a number of reasons why we could have imbalances.
Yeah. And that makes so much sense. Thank you for kind of outlining that. And I think too, commenting on the fact that our emotional health is so important. I mean, I even with my first son, my husband and I also have like PCOS. I have some other reproductive issues, but a big issue for me at the time was stress too. And it was actually stress of getting pregnant because I wanted to get pregnant so badly. And kind of long story short, when I just kind of let go of the control over, you know what, it's not going to happen in my timing and that's okay. And just that small letting go, we literally got pregnant 2 weeks later. Like it was insane. So it
Yeah.
really, really is so that emotional health, that stress relief is so important. And I think we don't look at that as much as we really need to be.
I love that story. That's
Yeah,
really inspiring. Thank you
yeah,
for sharing. I mean, it makes so much sense too if you think about it. Like when you're constantly trying to grip and hold, like there cannot be like activated blood flow, right? Like if we're trying to get like hormones stop, like our progesterone, like progestation hormone shuts off when there's stress. And it's like the
exactly.
most frustrating thing for people who are struggling with fertility for someone to say like stress less. And they're like, oh my gosh, get out of here with that. Like I'm so stressed, but I love that you shared your story because it's so true. And I've seen it so many times when people can just, yeah, try to relax, try to let it go, try to like realize it's going to happen in the timeline that it's going to happen in. Magic really does happen with our
It
hormones.
really does. Yeah. Yeah, it
Mhm.
really does. Okay. So now kind of speaking of pregnancy and fertility, I want to move into how the gut specifically affects our reproductive system, our fertility hormones. You know, our cycle is so incredibly important as women that it's so important that we're ovulating. It's so important that that's happening regularly for the sake of, you know, our whole body health. You mentioned earlier about detoxing and how the immune or the digestive system detoxes hormones, right? You're literally pooping out hormones is what I'm hearing you say. Like you are this is how your body is eliminating the waste of things that it doesn't need. And so you talked about estrogen dominance. You talked about like how, yeah, you talked about how our body is working to detox you from excess hormones or from whatever. So can you
Yeah.
go more into that? You talked a little bit about endometriosis. I know Hashimoto's thyroid issues play a huge part in our body's ability to have these regular hormonal balances. Can you just dive into that a little bit and in your experience, especially working with women that are trying to get pregnant, or even if they're not trying to get pregnant, but just for the sake of feeling better because our estrogen and progesterone play such a huge part in that. Can you just go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics. I have so many podcasts on this topic because it's like people come in and they go, "Hey, can I run, hormone testing because I want to get pregnant or this is off or that is off." And I have to kind of like sit and explain this to people, which is totally fine because like we're not taught any of this. But it's kind of like hard, I think, for women to like wrap their head around. But hormones are reactive to everything else in the body, including our gut. Okay. And so I don't often even test hormones, to be completely honest with you, unless someone's like, I want to get pregnant next month. And I'm like, do they need to like be, taking progesterone or something like that? But oftentimes, if you support the whole body and you support the gut, the hormones fall in line. And I've seen this like dozens of times, literally women who have no cycle at all, complete amenorrhea, people who have really irregular cycles because of PCOS, all of it comes back to balance when we work on these few things. So the gut and hormones are in constant communication. When one's off, it affects the other. And the gut really acts like a control center for hormone balance because it helps us to detox and absorb nutrients and regulate inflammation. So the number one would be like the connection with estrogen that I mentioned. So there's certain bacteria collectively called the estrobolome, which help process and eliminate excess estrogen. So when these bacteria are out of balance, estrogen can kind of build up in our body instead of being cleared out. And this is where it could be PMS, painful periods, heavy periods, mood swings, weight gain, fibroids, or even a condition like endo. I want to put a pretty big asterisk on that, which is that
Sure.
endometriosis is not a reproductive disease. It's a autoimmune inflammatory whole body illness that has some hormonal components. And there's some people who are more sensitive to estrogens and potentially that playing into endo, but endo is not like we used to think it's like, oh, it's just like about period pain. And it's not. We've found the doctors have found endometriosis on every single organ, including like your lungs. So just to clarify that.
I've heard it be on somebody's ear before.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's horrible. I wish it didn't exist at all. To be honest with you, it's just an absolutely horrendous thing to be dealing with. Thyroid health, so you mentioned that. So if our thyroid's underactive, we're going to have a hard time holding pregnancy. We're also going to potentially have, typically the most common would be like a heavy period or a painful period. And so because our thyroid, which is, one of my specialties, is like, it really sets the pace for our metabolism and our energy. And it depends on a lot of nutrients that are, of course, absorbed in the gut. So if we're not getting enough selenium, iodine, zinc, things like that absorbed in the gut, then we're going to have slow thyroid, and then we're going to have messed up hormones. So this is a huge one, like huge. And so if we can absorb and digest our food better, there is going to be more absorption for our thyroid. Also, right, if we have those pathogens and parasites and things, those are directly linked to thyroid imbalances. So if we can clear the trash out, right, like things we don't want, that improves thyroid health. And then that in turn improves fertility, reproductive health, and regular menstrual cycles. And I think one thing that gets missed too is, when I talk about stress, I've been mostly on this podcast talking about emotional stress, but stress in the body, it's interesting. Our body doesn't know the difference between a parasite and you getting into, like someone cutting you off in traffic. It really doesn't know the difference. And so these stressors are also physical stressors, like in our gut. And so going into stress and cortisol, chronic stress raises cortisol. It's our body's primary stress hormone. High cortisol thins the gut lining, like we were talking about, making it more permeable and causing leaky gut, inflammation, food sensitivities, right? Well, that's not a really hospitable place to bring a baby into. And so that can create an environment where we might miss ovulation or maybe have anovulatory cycles or something like that. And so because the gut is so tied to inflammation in the immune system, blood sugar stabilization, absorption of key fertility nutrients, right? If the gut is off, it's gonna influence our hormones in every way we could think of. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And I wanna really hone in right now on more so because it's my own experience, but estrogen dominance. We hear that all the time. Estrogen, we hear about, like, making sure that you're eating from glass instead of plastics, right? Because of the estrogen that's in the environment and all that. But estrogen dominance also plays a huge part in women who have PCOS. And I feel like more women than not have PCOS at this point. Like, but it's also a very big umbrella term. So there's a lot of different things that can go underneath that. But how does the body actually work to detox that excess estrogen? Like, if we were to, if we were wanting to focus on a functional nutrition path to help our bodies ovulate better by making sure that our estrogen is properly balanced, which then leads into progesterone being properly balanced. Like, how does that actually work with the body detoxing that estrogen? Like, again, to just go back to, I hate to just go back to food, because I know you're saying that it's so much more than food. Yeah. But yeah, how does that work? What can we do best to optimize our body's ability to detox those excess hormones that it doesn't need, that's causing issues with our reproductive cycle?
Yeah, so I think in order to answer this, we need a little bit of a biology.
Yeah. Go for it.
So how do we make hormones? Our brain connects to our ovaries. This is why the birth control pill is so effective. It stops the communication between our brain and our ovaries. That's the mechanism of action with most birth controls. There's other ways, but that's the main one. And so once our brain tells our ovaries to make the estrogen, then we have that. And estrogen, by the way, is an amazing hormone. Like, it's cardioprotective, it's neuroprotective. It's a very important hormone. I'm not like trashing it, but sometimes we get imbalances, right? And so when our body is done using the estrogen, what's supposed to happen is it gets broken down and cleared out. And so there's 3 phases of detoxification. Phase 1 is our liver labeling and packaging the quote unquote the trash, right? Like what it's used and doesn't need anymore. Then in phase 2, the liver ties up the trash bags securely. And number 3, the gut takes the trash to the curb and gets it out of the house. Okay, so it's like liver, gut. If any one of those phases gets backed up, the quote unquote trash, which is not just estrogen, it's all these other toxins as well, then we can have imbalances and problems and symptoms. So our liver is the first stop. And so it goes a little bit first through the liver, and then we can get into the gut. But how to support phase 1 liver detoxification is eating cruciferous vegetables every single day. So broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels, cabbage, arugula, they all contain sulforaphane and DIM, which are compounds that help push estrogen down the pathway. So 1 to 2 cups of cruciferous veggies every single day, very helpful. Ideally probably cooked or steamed. Raw probably would be a little tough on your gut. And then there's antioxidants as well for phase 1. So citrus fruits, raspberries or berries of any kind, green tea, things like that. And then minimizing, again, I feel like a broken record, but like minimizing alcohol and processed foods. There's also supplements that sometimes people will take. It really depends on what the testing tells us, because you don't want to overdo it either, but people can take sulforaphane. They can take broccoli sprouts are another one. You can just eat them, or you can take like DIM directly as well. And then in phase 2 of the liver, it's really all about like protein, actually, B vitamins, sulfur-rich foods, magnesium, and maybe supplementation depending on like, again, where they are, but like calcium diglucarate is a specific supplement sometimes I'll use. But things like leafy greens and eggs and grass-fed meat and wild salmon and things like that are really important. Some people genetically have issues with like methylation, which is like you're going to need like methyl B12 and methylfolate. So sometimes supplementation there can be helpful. The sulfurs, that's like garlic and onions and leeks and things like that. Magnesium, pumpkin seeds, almonds. Honestly, every single woman I work with needs magnesium supplementation. And then in phase 3 with the gut, it's just like making sure you're pooping, really, like, and that's where that constipation guide might come in handy. So hydration, fiber, fermented foods, things like that. And then like other things would be like reducing those toxin exposures, like you mentioned, is actually like one of the best things we can do, right? Like if we are getting exposure to kind of like non-usable toxic levels of estrogen through our beauty products, our cleaning products, like slowly switching to clean products can be really helpful. Switching to glass can be really helpful. Really washing your produce or trying to buy organic when you can. Reducing stress, obviously. Regular movement too is something we haven't really talked about, but like moving our bodies, right? Like movement helps move things out.
Makes sense.
And I would say like sweat, sauna sessions are really helpful too. So yeah, there is like quite a lot we can do with food. Sometimes supplementation and then this lifestyle. Honestly, we have so much control.
Yeah. And it sounds to me too like a lot of this is lifestyle. Especially like when you're an American, like our typical day-to-day lifestyle does not promote healthy well-being unless we are very intentional about making it promote healthy well-being, unfortunately, is where we're kind of at right now. Yeah. And it's funny too. I have a 24-year-old brother, and we were at my parents' house the other day for dinner, and they had vegetables on the table. And my brother made a joke of like, I don't eat vegetables. And I just looked at him like, do you poop? Like, do you, do things move in your body at all? Like, and oh my word. So it is so important. Now I also want to talk, and I know you have experience with Hashimoto's and thyroid issues, and the thyroid really being the driver for all of those hormones, right? Actually working in the first place, and then being able to use those hormones to then eliminate the process through those hormones, eliminate the rest of those hormones, making sure that you're pooping, all the things. But a lot of it starts with that thyroid too. So we're toward the end of our conversation today, but I don't want to let you go without being able to talk about Hashimoto's and hypothyroid, because of how important that is for our reproductive hormones and how it relates to the gut. Can you go into a little bit about that too?
So there, the gut, I would say, I was actually just on a discovery call with a client who ended up signing up for the 1-to-1 program. And it was really interesting. She's like, yeah, I have Hashimoto's. And then in the rest of her stuff, she was like, oh yeah, I've had gut issues since I was a kid. And it was kind of this footnote that she put into her intake. And I was like, wait, like you've had gut issues since you were a kid. Like that's directly tied to your Hashimoto's. And so she just didn't know that, because why would we, right? Like, I mean, it's not something we talk about very much. First of all, just to clarify, Hashimoto's is the most common cause of hypothyroidism, and it's an autoimmune condition where our immune system mistakenly attacks our thyroid gland and gradually lowers thyroid hormone production and causes some inflammation. And so I'll go to thyroid gut and then thyroid and other hormones in a second. So when our thyroid hormone is impacted and it's sluggish, it actually will slow our motility in our gut, and that will cause constipation and dysbiosis. So in order for our gut to work, our thyroid has to be working. If we have low stomach acid, like we were talking about, like with PPIs and antacids, that can also cause issues where we're not absorbing our food and then the thyroid doesn't get what it needs. But also having hypothyroidism lowers stomach acid production. So it's like a very interesting bidirectional highway. And then there's usually a weaker gut lining. So there is a whole theory in autoimmunity that's basically like there's 3 components that cause you to have an autoimmune disease. Number 1 is genetics, number 2 is a stressor, and number 3 is a leaky gut. And most people I know in my field believe that to be true. And it's true for me, right? I had the genetics for it, I had the stressor of the emotional abuse, and then I had the leaky gut. And then there we go, Hashimoto's, 22 years old. And so leaky gut can be a driver behind autoimmunity, including Hashimoto's. And then that's where like toxins and food particles and pathogens slip through that, like the hose, and activate the immune system. And then the gut bacteria can also create more inflammation and problems for people. So that's kind of like thyroid gut. And there's quite a bit of like research and studies around specific pathogens. Like H. pylori is directly tied to like thyroid, like lowering thyroid. There's certain parasites like Blastocystis hominis. There's actually quite a decent amount of studies on like certain things and the thyroid. And so like if we can restore the stomach acid, if we can restore motility, if we can restore the lining of the gut, and we can kick out the pathogens, most of my clients' Hashimoto's numbers, like their antibodies, go down, back down to reference range. Their thyroid hormone goes up. So, and they stop having symptoms. So it's pretty darn important, like really kind of crucially important in my opinion. And it's what, was one of the huge things that really helped reverse my onset in my 20s. So that's kind of thyroid gut. And then you asked about like thyroid and hormones.
Yeah.
So you can think about your thyroid like your body's like thermostat. So it's regulating energy production, digestion, hormone balance, metabolism, and even our menstrual cycle. So if our thyroid isn't functioning well, we're going to have a massive ripple effect into our reproductive hormones. So ovulation being the main event, right? I'm sure you talk about this all the time. Our period and obviously pregnancy depends on ovulation. We can't have a baby without ovulation. We can't have a bleed without ovulation. So, well, we can, but that's a whole other podcast.
Right. Yep.
Thyroid hormones are essential for healthy ovulation, period, end of story. So low thyroid function can cause irregular or inovulatory cycles where there's no egg that's released. So that's like huge, right? That's number 1. Number 2 would be progesterone. So after ovulation, right, our body needs enough thyroid hormone to support progesterone production. Low thyroid hormone, low progesterone, PMS, short luteal phases, mood swings, difficulty sustaining a pregnancy. Also estrogen, we're circling back to estrogen. When thyroid functions low, our liver can't clear estrogen effectively. This can lead to that imbalance with estrogen, causing those symptoms that we talked about. And then pregnancy, obviously, we have to ovulate. But even if you are actually pregnant, thyroid hormone requirements increase by almost 50%. 50%, because you're growing a human. So if it's undiagnosed or untreated hypothyroid, it can actually raise the risk, unfortunately, of miscarriage and infertility and even developmental issues for the baby. So really monitoring that with a licensed doctor and getting the right thyroid hormone medically, like medicine wise, like actually getting levothyroxine or whatever it is, really, really is important, because studies do show that 1 in 8 women are going to develop thyroid disorder in their lifetime. And thyroid disorders are very common to happen either during or right after pregnancy or during menopause or perimenopause. So like in our hormonal shifting, there's a lot of stress on the body. And that thought is that could like kind of initiate the thyroid underactivity.
Wow. At least on my podcast, I talk a lot about hormones, obviously. And we talk about reproductive hormones. We talk about maintaining pregnancy, making sure that your reproductive hormones are balanced right, and all of that. But there's so much more that goes into it, like the thyroid beforehand, making sure that that is functioning properly so that your hormones can be ebbing and flowing properly. And then from that, when your hormones have been used and have done their job, right? Detoxing that. And that is where the gut comes in, to be able to properly detox so that we're not experiencing estrogen dominance that so many women experience. Or we're not, and there, obviously we're talking about lifestyle, we're talking about, emotional regulation, and making sure that we're just overall having a healthy life. I think ultimately comes down to how healthy is your life? Are you making sure that your relationships are healthy, and that you are letting go of control where you need to let go of control, and controlling the things that you can control, right? I think there's a balance there. And then with what you eat, are you eating well so that your body can actually digest the nutrients from that to work there? It all works so well together when it is, this is going to sound dumb, but it works well together when it's working well. When something's off, when something's unbalanced, that's kind of a domino effect I'm hearing. And so just making sure that we're working with the right people to help us make sure that all of that is working well. Sophie, do you have any other last tidbits, advice, anything for a woman that's listening, that, because I feel like this can also be very overwhelming, right? Like maybe there's a woman here struggling with infertility that's really trying to go a natural route, or maybe there's a woman that has such painful periods and she's trying to understand why, and we hear all of this, we hear about the gut, we hear about the thyroid, we hear about hormones, and it's hard to not be so overwhelmed by it. So what is something tangible? What is your best advice for a woman if she's hearing this and she's just overwhelmed at this point? Like, what is your best advice? First step, where should she go? What should she do?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think the best advice is like take a deep breath and choose the next smallest action step that you can manage for you specifically. Maybe it's not the right time to completely uproot a relationship, right? Like depending on what that is. But maybe you can create some boundaries with that person. Maybe you can see them less. Or maybe it's like, oh, I haven't been eating any cruciferous vegetables. Like I could add some broccoli in, right? Or like, oh, I've never even heard of sauerkraut. Maybe I can add that in. And so I really like to encourage people to just take like the next smallest step, because all of it does matter, but what matters most is regulating our nervous system and not getting like overwhelmed and stressed about it. And so I think about all the things we talked about and like what's one small thing that you could focus on. When we talk about habit change, habit change happens when we have done something consistently for 3 weeks. So just do one thing at a time, right? And I would say the other thing is like, it doesn't have to be with me. It could be with anyone that you know and trust. But if you are struggling to kind of like piece it all together, like work with someone like me, or I'm open to work with you as well, of course. But like having a coach and having someone who can look at the big picture and tell you, hey, do this first, then do this, can be very helpful if we're easily overwhelmed. I have coaches, in my business. I've had coaches in my health. I have someone who works with me on my health right now, not because I'm not smart enough to know what to do. It's just because I need someone to guide me. So guide yourself first, what's one small step. And then number 2, if that's still feeling overwhelming, reach out to someone who can guide you, because you're going to get there a lot faster. Like I think about how I struggled for 7 years, like stumbling around, hair loss, 40 extra pounds of weight, depression, anxiety, every gut issue. I was going to the bathroom 10 times a day. Okay. Really bad.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
bad. And then within 2 weeks of working with this practitioner, I was starting to feel better. Within 90 days, everything felt like it was healed. Like I would pay 4 times the amount of money to that person to get my life back. And so I really do believe in the power of like having someone else, even if it's a friend, like keep you accountable. Like maybe there's someone else that's in your life that could like, or your husband or someone who could like do it with you, like just get into action, even if it's a small, simple action.
Yeah. Sophie, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on. If somebody did want to work with you, I would want to work with you for sure. If somebody wanted to work with you or just find you, where can they do that?
You're so sweet. Yeah, everything is She Talks Health. I have a podcast. It's the She Talks Health podcast. We talk about all things women's health. If you want to work with me specifically, the link is shetalkshealth.com/contact. Actually, sorry, /call, not contact, /call, shetalkshealth.com/call. If you're like, I want to have a partner in my health and like go deep and do these labs and really be supported and work on my stress and all the things and go full in, then that's the link. I do have the constipation guide that I can send you. And yeah, I would just say otherwise, like, feel free to just DM me. Like if you guys have questions on Instagram, I'm at She Talks Health. I love talking about this stuff and empowering you. So I'm available for your questions too.
Awesome. Sophie, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Truth and Fertility podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please leave a 5-star review. That helps me tremendously. For more information about learning to chart your fertility cycle, you can visit truthandfertility.com, and I'll talk to you guys again next week.